All right, welcome everybody. This is Hunter from Fossil Creek Nursery. We're going to do a little seminar on pollinators and also creating a pollinator garden. I'm going to start off just with a little basic information on creating a pollinator habitat. Just some kind of basic stuff, nothing real specific. We'll start getting into that stuff later. So just to start out, pollinators are an animal species that provide pollination services to plants. They're cultivated gardens and agriculture settings around the globe, and bees and other pollinators have co-evolved with plants to specifically have pollinators that visit each flower. Um, these services help many plants complete their life cycles and ensure them food and shelter. More than 70% of flowering plants use pollinators for their reproduction and seed production. And also about a third bite that we eat as humans are because of pollinators. So very important for both our environment and our well-being. So just how pollination happens, pollinator enters a flower and the pollen grains from the flower stick onto its body. Pollinators get nectar from the flower for food, but then in turn, the pollen from the actual plant sticks to their bodies, and when they visit different flowers, that's how they get the cross-pollination. Moving on, so then this results in cross-pollination, and like I said earlier, this is crucial for reproduction and the production of fruits and seeds. So just a little bit about a pollinator habitat. Just like humans and other animals, pollinators need food, water, shelter, and space to support their populations. So this would be where a diverse and differing flowers and also different heights, widths, and whatnot to create a diverse ecosystem for the pollinators. A habitat should be intentionally planted to provide nutrition for pollinators. So certain pollinators, like certain flowers, there are also flowers that have structures that the bees can sit on, and different bees like different kinds of flowers like that. So take, for example, a bumblebee, which is a very large bee, needs a more sturdy flower to rest in to gather nectar. And whereas something small, like a native bee, for example, can pretty much pollinate almost anything, including very small flowers. Hummingbirds have long beaks. This is so they can they get their beaks inside of the flower and they hover as a hummingbird does. So just how to create a pollinator habitat. Once again, it's a garden, so it can be beautiful while also be useful. Like I said before, having water and the habitat is going to promote more pollinators to visit your garden and also pollinate your vegetables, flowers, whatever it may be. Bees are probably the most diverse of pollinators. They have a range of plants that they can visit, whereas things like butterflies and hummingbirds are a little more specialized. There's also bats, beetles that pollinate. There's flies that can pollinate. But these are a little more rare. And in Colorado, we specifically want to focus on bees, butterflies, and also hummingbirds. And just like I said earlier, the bees like different shaped flowers, things like that. And it's best to plant to replicate nature. And so going back to having a really diverse and colorful garden is very important. One thing that's really important to think about when you're creating your pollinator garden is having differing flowers, flowering shrubs or trees that flower at different points in the season. So having things that bloom early spring to late spring, and then mid-season, and then going into the fall. All right. So also location of the garden is very important. Most pollinators like very sunny areas and also large connected habitats. And when I say connected, I mean, flowers kind of more closely spaced out, not, you don't want to have things just kind of sparsely around your garden. And also, one of the things to think about is having a kind of front yard to backyard, almost flower bed to the side that promotes them from both going into your front and back. And this is good because some bees might not get the flower scent from the backyard, and likewise the other way around. So this is kind of being more efficient and also having a more successful garden. Um, just a few things that are challenges for pollinators. Intensive agriculture and monocropping uh, is one of the most detrimental things to bees and other pollinators. And this is because monocropping, by definition, is the act of having a single crop for multiple years over and over again. Um, Crop rotation is more readily used in more recent times as more knowledge has been gained about the pollinators. But it still is a problem, especially with all the commercial agriculture that we have in America. There are large expanses of space that are single crops, such as corn, wheat, etc. Also, overuse of chemicals and pesticides specifically is very detrimental. And I'll go into that a little bit more detail here in a few minutes. Destruction of natural habitats, so development, housing, things like that, also detrimental to bees, especially native bees, because those are the ones that truly are living in our ecosystem, in the ground and things like that. Honeybees too, of course, but native bees really affected. And just closing up this first section, just having any habitat is better than no habitat. If you're not quite certain, if you did it right, you've probably done enough. So, just being knowledgeable, knowing a little bit about it, will go a long way. All right, and go in a little more specifics on but first pollinators, so different ones like bees, hummingbirds, butterflies. Um, like I was talking about at the beginning, bees, hummingbirds, and also other pollinators have co-evolved with flowers to fit their specific needs. Um, Bees play an integral role on crop pollination. Like I was saying earlier, about 1 out of every 3 bites of food is due to a bee pollination, which is pretty important considering there is studies that shown that bees are declining. Um, One thing that is really important is we have about 960 plus native bees in Colorado. Native bees are actually more efficient at pollinating than European honeybees. Um, just like the namesake says, European honeybees, they're from Europe. They've been brought over, hundreds of years ago for the fact of pollinating crops. Um, so sometimes the native bees kind of get lost in translation, but very efficient, really important to know. Um, you can create habitats for native bees very easily. They live in the ground for one. Very common that they live in the ground. So some open space between, your garden, your vegetable garden, and your flowers would be really good. Um, Having holes in wood, so you can actually take a block of wood, take a drill bit about yay big and drill holes all throughout it. Sorry, drill holes all throughout it. And also something else to do is have a water dish or something close by. I see I got a couple questions. I will address those at the end, so don't worry. I got you. I see them. We'll get it. We'll get it answered for you. No problem. So that's a little bit about bees. Bees, most important pollinator, ones that are most well known. But being as such, you don't want to forget about the other ones: butterflies, hummingbirds. So just a little bit about butterflies. Uh, Butterflies are kind of a secondary pollinator here in Colorado. Um, Creating a habitat for them, they like shelter from the wind. Very important because butterflies are a little bit bigger winged, so they can definitely be affected by our strong winds here in the Front Range. Um, Also, the thing to think about is having food plants that caterpillars enjoy. Now, there are detrimental caterpillars for gardens. But a lot of those are actually moths. Butterfly caterpillars are not quite as dangerous or harmful to vegetable gardens or flowers or things like that. So having something that both the caterpillar and the butterfly like is very important, because when you start creating new generations and have basically a life cycle going in your garden, that just is all for the better. That actually goes same for the bees. I meant to mention that. So creating a good habitat for the bees, they're going to reproduce, and you're going to have more and more bees. So beneficial in many ways. Also, it's excuse me, good to know that certain butterflies only lay eggs on specific plants. Just quick about hummingbirds. Like I was saying at the beginning, hummingbirds, they've got a long, small beak, and they hover. So what they do is they use the beak to actually get into the flower, and in turn, when the flower gets disturbed, pollen is released, and the pollen gets onto the hummingbird. And then, like I was saying, hummingbird goes from the next flower, and all of it is cross-pollinated. So I just want to go into some more about challenges for bees, being insecticides, things like that. Bees are very susceptible to neonicotinoids. These are really powerful pesticides. Not technically used unless there is a serious issue with pest infestations. But if there's flowering plants or bees in the area, using this is almost a certain death sentence. Something to think out about. And then I've got an example of a neonicotinoid. So this guy's imidacloprid. This is a systemic product. So this would be put at the root zone. It gets taken up by the plant, and the plant actually transfers this through the xylem and phloem, creating a resistance to the specific pest. So this being said, what happens is it ends up in the flowers also, and this will kill the bee almost instantly. And it also transferring the pollen, it basically spreads this to the other bees, which we do not want. So if there are needs for pest control, the most bee-friendly, I've got a couple of them. So I've got BT, which is a derivative from a bacteria. It actually is a bacteria, sorry. This can kill soft-bodied insects. It can kill worms, caterpillars, things like that, and it is safe to use on vegetables, which is really nice. And this is actually a foliar spray. Something that you can use, but use sparingly, is a horticultural oil. So this is a neem oil. Neem oils, basically the idea behind it is it's really good for killing larvae, but what it does is the oil covers the soft body bugs or insects, and what it does is it essentially suffocates them. So not too great, and it's non-selective, so it can affect bees. So what you would do if you're using the neem oil is apply it very early in the morning before bees are active. Bees don't really become active until around 50 degrees Fahrenheit to 55 degrees. That's when they start becoming active. When they're cold, they just kind of sleep, take a nap. So yeah, early in the morning or late at night. So when I say late at night, I don't mean like midnight. You can use it here in Colorado. The temperature drops super quick when the sun goes down. So hit this 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, especially in the summertime. Maybe wait a little bit longer, but that is definitely an option for you. Another one, this is also a horticultural oil, and it is specifically bee safe. So this is probably number one you want to use. It's organic, and its main ingredient is actually sesame oil and fish oil. So derived from natural plants, from fish. So good stuff. I'll put that a little bit closer just so everybody can see it. And this is something you would also spray foliar onto the plants. Some other insecticides that aren't really safe for bees or other pollinators, but they're less toxic than a neonicotinoid, is pyrethrins, and they're also permethrins. This product is not organic, but it is not as toxic. Um, if this would kind of be used as a last resort, and also something to keep in mind, if a plant is not blooming, then you can spray. That is an okay time to spray. This is because if it's not blooming, no food for the bees, they don't want to come around. However, it is really important to know that the neonicotinoids especially will travel and there will be drift. So this is a problem that happens a lot of in bigger farms. Somebody's got, let's say an almond tree in California is blooming. Well, the next farm over, they don't have flowers quite yet. So farm A with flowers doesn't want to spray, but farm B can spray. So the drift is one of the most detrimental things to pollinators because it's usually accidental. Nobody means to really kill. I mean, hopefully not, at least, but it is an accidental thing, and it happens a lot more often than you would think. So kind of being aware, especially if you're a farmer, talk to your neighbor, talk to, the guy down the road, talk to anybody, just kind of figure out what everybody's doing. And then you guys work, and you can work together and figure out a good plan of action. So just something to think about. Along with that, beneficial insects, predatory wasps, ladybug larvae are also affected by insecticides. So it would be also detrimental to your pest control if your beneficial insects get killed. So once again, it is important to be very aware of when you're spraying, where you're spraying, etc. Native bees also we're talking about, they can definitely get affected by those insecticides. All right, so moving on, a little less sciencey stuff. Let's talk a little bit about flowers and shrubs and some trees that have that are attractive to bees, etc. And these are all things that we also carry here. So I tried to keep it to things that you can find here at Fossil Creek Nursery. And once again, I see all y'all's questions. I will get to those here in about 5 minutes or so. I'm getting close to the end of my material. So quick start, we'll start with allium. It's an ornamental onion. Its flowers are ball-shaped, tiny little florets. They get anywhere from 6 inches to even up to 3 foot. And they're like a lilac to purple color. The bloom time varies by cultivar. So next one, anemone. Early spring is when these are blooming. So blue, white, and pink. Bees love these. They're zone 4, so they're very hardy to here. And then also Japanese anemone. It blooms in the fall, and it's a little bit bigger, 2 to 4 feet tall, large flowers, and it's also zone 4, so it is hardy to our environment. And you can also split anemones in the spring to propagate them. So the common name wine cup, another perennial, Clarijo, excuse my pronouncing because I'm not great at it. It's zone 3 to 9. It's hardy and drought tolerant. It's ground cover, so it's short. It's got a purpley wine color, and they're also native to North America. Moving on, we've got buckwheat, eriogonum. It's low growing with many stems, and it's got small yellow flowers. And this is a mid-season to late season bloomer, anywhere between mid-June to late July, and it's very drought tolerant. Going on next, got yarrow, scientific name Achillea. This is a mid-season bloomer, white, pink, red, yellow, and orange flowers. So you got quite an option or choice of options for that. They can grow anywhere from 1 to 4 feet, and they're easy to grow. They've got a fern-like foliage, and also deer and rabbit resistant, which is definitely nice around here because there are a lot of rabbits around this time of year. Columbine, this is a native to Colorado, early to mid-season bloomer. This is one that also attracts hummingbirds. It can get 1 to 2 foot tall, anywhere between 1 to 3 feet wide. It's perennial, so it comes back every year, which is great. Native to Colorado, it does well, and there are many different color varieties for it. Moving on, Citranthus, also known as Jupiter's beard or red valerian. This is an early to mid-season bloomer, drought tolerant, and it gets anywhere from 1.5 feet to 2.5 feet. And there's tiny trumpet flower clusters. This attracts hummingbirds and butterflies. So I'm seeing that there might be a little bit of problem with the video, so just give me one moment. Let's see. Try to fix this for you guys. All right, I think it should be working okay now, but if anything happens, please just let me know in the comment section and I'll try to work with it and fix it. The stream says it's cutting out every once in a while. So, but it's looking okay now. So, all right, we'll work with it and we'll keep it moving here. So next one, common name, wallflower. It's the Erysimum. Early season bloomer, low to moderate water. It's easy to grow. Fragrant flowers, and it's very dense. Rabbit resistant also. And it actually, contrary to a lot of flowers, it's as well in lean or low organic matter soil. So kind of nice, especially here in Colorado. We've got clay soil, not a lot of organic matter. So it can be very tough on plants. If you can grow something here in Colorado, you can pretty much grow anything. So moving on, we got Campanula, also known as the bellflower, mid-season bloomer, full sun, moderate H2O, so drought tolerant. It's got purple and white flowers and varies in size. And there is more than 250 species. And this one prefers well-drained organic soil. And then we got Nepeta, catmint. Early to mid-season bloom and full sun. This one has low H2O, so very drought tolerant. It gets 1 to 2 foot tall, 2 to 3 foot wide. Another one that's easy to grow, and both bees and hummingbirds enjoy the Nepeta. Got beard tongue, scientific name penstemon. The season varies between cultivars of penstemon, but it is full sun, low H2O. They're native to Colorado, specifically 200 species actually native to Colorado. They have bright pink flowers, and they actually do not attract hummingbirds, but bees do like them. So pincushion flower, also known as scabiosa, early to late season, full sun, low to moderate H2O. So pretty drought tolerant here, which is, as we know, Colorado's rough. It's great to have that drought tolerance. This one's 1 to 3 foot, 1 to 2.5 foot tall, 1 to 2 foot wide. So kind of a good medium-sized flower. And the flowers look like pin cushions, which is really neat. They're really neat-looking flowers, and the butterflies love them. So something that's really drought tolerant, especially here for Colorado, sedum, late bloomer. It's full sun. It's a succulent, so low amount of water needed. Basically a zero escape plant. It's got long-lasting flowers, which is great. Something that we want. We were talking about earlier. We want something that blooms, or have a diversity of things that blooms throughout the season. Perennials, there's not one perennial that will bloom consistently, so that's where we're coming in with that diversity. There we got some flowering trees, or small or bigger shrubs, if you will. So the serviceberry. Serviceberries bloom early, so they're one of the first to bloom early spring. They actually get their flowers before they get their leaves. They're big white flowers, and then they eventually turn into little tiny fruits, and we're talking like they're small ones. So they attract birds. The hummingbirds don't eat the fruits per se, but birds come in. It's always nice to see some birds, give them a little bit of food. Something that comes up is it messy? Does the fruit drop? The fruit's so tiny that if the bee or if the birds don't get it first, it's almost going to be unnoticeable. They're also good to eat too. They're a strange kind of flavor. It's almost like a really sweet, almost tart tomato, which sounds really weird, but that's how I that's how I taste it. But they're interesting too. And service berries, like I said, they're one of the first to bloom, so something to get early season, get things rolling. Just a couple more here. Butterfly bush. Butterfly bush get big and they're rapid growing. Something a little bit different about butterfly bush is they're good habitat, and the flowers they attract the butterflies, but butterflies don't actually pollinate them. So it's something that you can have kind of in the middle of your garden. Since it's so big, you can have it towards the back and filter in perennials, annuals in between, um, which is great because having that diverse garden, once again, that's what we're looking for. Plus, it gives you good looks. You got, kind of levels, 3D, if you will. Coming up to a few last ones, we got an aster. This is a late summer to fall. There's small violet flowers, and it mounds like a bush. So it's about 1 to 3 foot tall, 1 to 2 foot wide, and this is specifically butterflies. One of my personal favorite is blue Mispirea, Caryopteris, and Clandestinus. Full sun and low H2O. It does really, really good here in Colorado. They get 3 to 4 foot high, 4 to 5 foot wide. The shrubs, they almost resemble Russian sage a little bit. It's pretty easy to get them mixed up. Even we mix it up sometimes, but of course we try to make that as good as possible. They have blue flowers that attract the pollinators. And this one specifically is good not to overwater. So Agastache, also known as a hyssop, they are a shade perennial and very cold hardy. They like well-drained soil and attract hummingbirds and butterflies. So last flower we got here is the Helianthus. Save the best one for last. It's a sunflower. Sunflowers vary in size, but a lot of the quintessential sunflowers that you see are the tall, single-stemmed with a large flower. They're 3 foot wide in clumps, drought tolerant, easy to grow, and big, big flowers. And just one more thing to think about is fruit trees also attract pollinators. Plus, if you've got fruit trees, you want pollinators to be there, so you're going to get good fruit. Apples, peach, and pears are specifically ones that come to mind with the most success. Also, spring snow crab apples, which are beautiful. Spring snow does not actually produce crab apples, which is very appealing because crab apples can be a little bit of a mess. And they, being spring snow, they are covered with white flowers in the spring. So, yep, so that about wraps up what I've got for everybody. So I'm going to try to answer a couple of these questions. Looks like we got a couple of them. So I'm going to start with Lynette. Do hummingbirds migrate? So that is a great question. Hummingbirds do leave when it's colder. They migrate down to southern Colorado. They are mainly in the plains, is where you'll see them more often. But they do go up to the foothills. My mother actually had a house up towards near Estes, and just having a few plant or flowers that the hummingbirds enjoy, plus a hummingbird feeder, which is going back to giving them water and sustenance, just like we would want. I mean, every day she'd have 6, 7 of those, just feeding on the sugar water there, and pollinating plants. All right, so in the Great Plains of Nebraska, saw hummingbird migration map. So they're not they don't migrate very far. It's more like in-state. We're specifically talking about in Colorado too. Um, Basically, when it gets really cold, they kind of bail out, find a warmer spot. But yeah, it's not a migration how we think of like a monarch butterfly migration, which is from the north all the way down to Mexico. It's not quite that large of a distance. Yes, so yellow jackets will deter native bees. Yellow jackets will prey on bees. Um, a way to handle this is there's yellow jacket traps. I'm sure you've seen before water bags that seem to ward them off. Well, this is kind of a similar thing, but what it does also is it's got a small dish that's got sugar water in it. And what they do, it's kind of a cone, and the hummingbird, or I mean, the hummingbird, sorry about that, the wasp or the yellow jacket will kind of come in from the top, and then they can't get back out, trapping them. And this works really well. Working at a tree nursery, we definitely deal with yellow jackets, wasps, etc. a lot, and that is our main way of doing it. We don't like to spray for them. Um, and there's many yellow jackets that also nest in the ground, so spraying is not necessarily going to do a whole lot to it. Um, if the infestation is really bad, um, like we talked about earlier, if there's no flowers around, or if you're not really seeing bees and you find a big wasp nest, go ahead and spray that with anything like a raid or a nerve thing like that. Something that's this spraying for a small nest isn't necessarily as bad as if you're trying to spray a whole garden or et cetera, like a big area. If it's a concentrated area, not as harmful. Also, another thing to think about is if you're not spraying a plant, the bee is not going to necessarily come in contact with that accidentally. So, say you got a nest in the ground, hit that with whatever you can. So I got another question from Glenda. I'm in Oregon, grow dahlias. I get tons of different bees and hummingbirds, but also get earwigs and spiders. Yes, neem is good for the earwigs. Definitely, that's one of the things that neem controls. Once again, use that horticultural oil earlier in the day before it gets above 50 degrees, and that's kind of your prime time. So, what about milkweed? Milkweed in Colorado, we don't necessarily grow milkweed. It is considered a noxious weed. And so, yeah, that looks like about it for questions. Appreciate y'all's time and tuning in. I'll be doing another one next week on soil and fertilizer health. So, yep, same time, same place. We'll see you then.